Now let's turn to the state of play in these races. We got some experts here. Cynthia Tucker's political columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Ron Brownstein is the National Journal columnist. I want to start with Ron on this big question. You were in California this weekend. I was there for my wife's Stanford reunion. Big question. What's going on with Jerry Brown? Was it the way that Meg Whitman seemed to have treated her Latina housekeeper?
Yeah, well, this is a bigger margin.
Is that it? Is it personal?
I think it is largely personal in that Meg Whitman has made herself, through a variety of reasons, the focal point of the campaign more than Jerry Brown. I mean, it is more.
And that's not good.
And that is not good at a time when people are so dissatisfied. That's why the other race is closer. I mean, the general feeling in California is that the governor's race is more a referendum on Whitman. The Senate race is more a referendum on Boxer. Okay. And no one wants to be kind of the focus at a time when you have such, broad dissatisfaction with the way things are going.
I think in California, they're voting against my friend Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think that Jerry Brown ad that shows her lip syncing, basically, or, synchronized swimming with Arnold Schwarzenegger on every single word she spoke is lethal to her, because it looks like she's another Republican business person who says they can fix up Sacramento when it's already been screwed by a Republican businessman.
Well, that was a very clever ad for Jerry Brown to run, because I thought he'd have more trouble digging himself out of the hole I thought he was in when one of his staffers was overheard calling Meg Whitman something that you should never call a woman.
We agree on that.
But he came right out of that with this hard-hitting ad. Meg Whitman's $130 million that she spent hasn't done her any good. But in an even odder contest, Barbara Boxer seems to be pulling away from Carly Fiorina, and I thought that would be harder for Boxer to pull.
Well, you were making a point. Yeah. Why is Barbara Boxer, who's been around a while, you either like her or you don't. I've always liked her, but some people don't. She's too ideological for some people. What's brought her back out of the woods where she's up to 50?
Let's be clear. The LA Times poll is better for both Brown and Boxer than anything else that's been out there. Well, it's a little wider. I mean, the public policy through California last week was +8 for Brown. This is +13, +5 for Boxer.
But time has moved on in that week.
But there are a number of other.
Why do you think Boxer's ahead?
I think people do feel that Boxer is ahead, but Democrats do not feel that race is done. They're not even sure the governor's race is done, but they feel that they have a stronger advantage there, because I think Brown really has reemerged as kind of an eccentric, almost ingratiating character, as opposed to Whitman, who's had trouble connecting on an emotional level and maybe facing some backlash from the sheer amount of money. But Boxer's challenge is that the backdrop of her race is dissatisfaction with what's going on in Washington. Okay. Whitman's challenge is that, as you say, the backdrop of her race is dissatisfaction in what's going on in Sacramento. So there's a very different context in which each of these are being fought.
But let's not leave out the Latino vote. Neither one of them, neither Republican is doing well with Latinos.
When you fire somebody after something you knew what they were doing illegally all those years, and they pretend you're cleaner than whatever. Let me ask you about Jerry Brown. I love this guy for one reason. He makes all guys who are getting older feel much better, because he's 70. He was governor back in the 70s.
He replaced Ronald Reagan.
He replaced Ronald Reagan way back then. And look, here's the question. I really am fascinated by the fact that he just looks like he's come alive physically in those debates. He's got the juice. He's got the shot
clearly enjoys politics. Right. He enjoys running. He enjoys the contest.
Let's take a look at Pennsylvania. We were there last week. This is the Muhlenberg tracking poll out of, as I said, out of Allentown. It's got Toomey moving ahead, the Club for Growth. He's a bit to the right, as you know, Ron. Yeah. He's a bit to the right of the normal Pennsylvania voters. Is he just done something right, or is it just anti-Washington, anti?
No, I think in a different year it would be much more difficult for him to win. But because of what we're seeing in the movement among independents, the Philadelphia suburbs have been the key to the movement of that state as they've moved from reliably Republican toward being leaning strongly Democratic. Obama won them by 200,000 votes in 2008. Now, because of dissatisfaction over the economy, the size and scale of government issues, Toomey can compete there in a way that he might not be able to
otherwise. Taxes is a dynamite issue in the suburbs. We saw Marjorie Margolis get killed on that issue years ago. Here he is. Here's Toomey. Here's Toomey saying today he doesn't see a connection between himself and other candidates like Christie. Of course he doesn't. Let's listen. Who want to be connected to her? The witch. Let's take a look.
I really don't see the need to do this. This is a sort of fictitious connection that Joe Sestak is trying to encourage. Frankly, I don't think anybody's confusing the candidates. I've been campaigning for 18 months now. I've had a very clear message for that entire time. I don't see the issue.
So, Ron, here's a guy, you wear the big clothes. Right. We're wearing ties because we have to on this show. Yeah. You don't wear a tie. You show a little underwear shirt underneath. You look like a regular guy these days. And you say, I got nothing to do with the person running in the next state. Yeah. I don't even know her.
Look, from an agenda point of view, there's enormous overlap between virtually all of the serious Republican Senate contenders. We did a piece on that. You can look down the board on these issues. They're very similar. But in terms of credentials and credibility and kind of personal gravitas, you're talking about something very different with Pat Toomey than you are with Sharon Angle.
Because the Philadelphia media market, a lot of people in Philly are watching these ads.
Exactly, and that has helped Sestak a little bit. They're actually...
She's got great name ID, by the way, Christine O'Donnell.
Well,
everybody knows who she is.
Because we talk about her all the time. She's so outrageous, it's hard not to talk about her. And as you know, in certain parts of Pennsylvania, people see the Delaware commercials. And so
they're called Philadelphia commercials. They're showing I hate to tell you, Philadelphia television is so dominant. It covers all of South Jersey, 5 counties, and the entire state of Delaware.
You know, Chris,
and that's why it's expensive to run for office.
Yes. Look at Pennsylvania and California. There's a lot of similarity between the way the big voter groups are dividing in each state. What matters is how many of them are there in each state. In California, Barbara Boxer and Jerry Brown are getting walloped among blue-collar white voters as Democrats are elsewhere, but they're a smaller share of the electorate. You mentioned Latinos. A third of the vote in California this time is going to be non-white, and among the white voters, more, and they will show that will be even down. And among the white voters, more of them will be college-educated, white-collar white voters, where these Democrats are doing better. In Pennsylvania, there aren't quite as many of those to work with, and in a place like Arkansas or North Dakota, there are none of them. So that's where Democrats get in that situation.
In 1982, Tom Bradley was supposed to win the governorship out in that state, and all of a sudden this boring guy, Doug Majan, came back. In Illinois, a new Chicago Tribune poll has Republican Mark Kirk up 3 points over the guy Alexei Giannoulias, 44-41. I thought he was a very attractive candidate, Giannoulias, when you meet him. I mean, of all the guys we met last week, he's the coolest customer. He worked the crowd. He didn't just come in and do the speech or the interview with me. He went around, met everybody, stayed there for 45 minutes. Likeable in person.
But he's got some major baggage. He carries some major ethical... He's got ethical issues, banking issues. The one thing you don't want to be in this particular cycle is a candidate who has, run a bank that failed, whose family has run a bank that's made
What about his opponent who has the Blumenthal problem of I hate the word lying, not telling the truth about his war record, his military.
Well, that's probably why the race is as close as it is.
Are there any great candidates this year? They're just imperfect candidate against another imperfect candidate.
Well, the way the modern campaign works, I mean, you could be George Washington and you come out of this with a lot of scars.
Maybe.
But you know what? Sestak, Kirk, Murray, Bennett in Colorado, even Boxer in California, they're all facing really the same mathematical equation. They're going to get walloped in rural parts of their states. They're going to get walloped among white blue-collar voters. Okay. And the issue is, can they hold down their losses in the suburbs and get out enough minorities to get over the top?
2 things I want to point out. I want you to point out before you're reporting this week. First thing, big swing toward the Republicans among independents, 44-30. The second thing is you interviewed the president.
Yes.
What was it that hasn't been picked up on in your interview with him? I want to talk about attitude, as we say in Philly.
Yeah.
Has his attitude changed?
Philly, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
Tell me, I was in San Francisco watching the damn thing.
Has his attitude changed?
You got me caught up in my emotions now because I care a lot about the Phillies. Is it a problem for him that he is seen too elite, too holier-than-thou in a sense of being above politics? Does he have to get down a little bit into the real world the next time around if he's going to get reelected? Does he know that?
Look, there's no question that among kind of working-class white voters, the Democrats are going to get plastered and may even perform more poorly in this election than they did in '94. But I did not. When I talked to the president last week,
does he share their sweat and worry about life?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, he is not sweating. He does not seem to be. I interviewed Bill Clinton the Sunday before the '94 election, and you could feel the weight of it on him and him trying to wrestle with how he got himself in this position. Talking to President Obama, it was clear that he's begun to think very systematically about how he might deal with a world with a lot more Republicans in it. But I did not hear a lot of second guessing. It was much more matter of fact about how I am going to move forward.
But what about his personal attitude towards the average guy, if you will, black or white or whatever? Does he feel a little humbled by his failure to get the unemployment rate down to the 8% his economist said he would? I'll ask you that.
Of course he does. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that the economy weighs heavily on the president's mind. For heaven's sakes, let's remember his own childhood. The president didn't grow up privileged. He grew up the child of a single...
He remembered?
Well, of course he does. He grew up the child of a single mother. His grandparents were working class. They struggled. Does he project that perhaps in the way Bill Clinton did? No, he doesn't. But Bill Clinton lost too. Bill Clinton may have projected that better, but the Democrats lost 52 seats when the unemployment rate was under 6%. So if the Democrats can now hold their losses to in the 50s, I don't think they will have done that badly.
Whoa.
To under 50s?
To in the 50s.
Well,
in the 50s.
That's
in the 50s.
The way I hear it put by an expert is that the Democrats only lose 45 seats in the House this year. It's a good night.
Whoa, that's a, that's a bad good night.
What's your
Look, I do think it'll be somewhere in that range, if not slightly higher. I mean, any place, as I've said to you before, any place where Democrats are going to have to win a lot of working class white voters to win, they are in danger, whether it's the Senate or the House, because those voters are both skeptical of government, they were dubious of Obama to begin with, and they're being hammered by the economy. So it's a very tough terrain.
I got my predictions at the end of the show. I'm going to tease a little bit to the end of the show, but they're along those lines. I think it's going to be very tough for them to beat this win, but I still think you got to vote. And if anybody up there doesn't vote because they think it's a bad year for their party, they're making a mistake, because there's always going to be good candidates you can find out there you should vote for, and bad ones you got to keep out of office, no matter what the title flow, which is kind of dirty sometimes. Anyway, thank you.